The universe had already decided she shouldn't exist. Then she fell in love with the one woman who could change everything. The first time Commander Elara Voss saw the woman, she was standing at the edge of the docking bay, barefoot on steel that hummed with the pulse of 1,000 departing ships. No one stood there barefoot. The station, Astra Prime, floated above a dying blue star, a place built for efficiency, not reverence. Boots, uniforms, synthetic soles. Rules wrapped around everyone like gravity. And yet there she was, dark hair loose down her back, hands folded calmly behind her, as if the vacuum beyond the force field were nothing more than a distant ocean. Elara slowed without realizing it. She had just returned from a 3-year deep-range patrol beyond mapped space. Her body still ached with the memory of cryosleep, her mind thick with silence. She should have been focused on debriefs, on the political tension humming through the station like static. Instead, she felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest. Recognition, without memory. The woman turned. Their eyes met. The moment snapped like a severed tether. Elara's breath caught. The station noise faded. She had survived asteroid storms, pirate ambushes, the slow madness of isolation, but this was different. This was not fear. This was gravity. The woman's eyes were an impossible silver, reflective as starlight on water. She did not smile. She did not look away. She simply watched Elara as if she had been waiting. "You're late," the woman said, her voice low, steady, carrying across the bay without effort. Elara blinked. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No," the woman replied. Then, softer, "Not yet." Before Elara could respond, station security swept between them, weapons slung low but ready. "Commander Voss," one officer said. "Admiral Cade is waiting." Elara's gaze flicked back. The woman was gone. That night, Elara dreamed of stars folding inward, of a voice calling her by a name she did not recognize. She woke with her heart racing and the taste of ozone on her tongue. She hadn't dreamed in years. Astra Prime was unraveling. Political factions whispered about energy shortages, about the ancient technology buried in the black sectors, technology that bent spacetime itself. The council wanted Elara because she had gone farther than anyone else and returned unchanged. Or so they thought. Admiral Cade's office overlooked the blue star, its light filtered through polarized glass. "There's a civilian on this station," Cade said, sliding a data slate across the desk. "No registry. No origin record. She appeared 3 days ago, walked through a restricted gate that hasn't been active in centuries." Elara's fingers tightened. The image on the slate bloomed into view. Barefoot. Dark-haired. Silver-eyed. Her. "Who is she?" Elara asked quietly. Cade hesitated. "That's the problem. According to every system we have, she shouldn't exist." Elara felt the universe shift, just slightly, like a door opening where there had only ever been a wall. "Find her," Cade said. "Before someone else does." Elara stood, pulse hammering. She already knew she would. Because some part of her, older than memory, deeper than reason, understood one terrifying truth. The woman at the edge of the sky was not a stranger. She was a beginning. Elara found her in the greenhouse. It was the last place she expected to look, and somehow the first place she felt pulled toward. Astra Prime's greenhouse ring was a quiet anomaly, a circle of living things suspended in metal and stars. Artificial sunlight filtered down through curved glass, warm and golden, coaxing life from soil shipped across light years. Trees arched gently overhead, their leaves whispering in a programmed breeze. For a station built to survive, this place existed solely to remember how it felt to live. Elara stepped inside, the doors sealing behind her with a soft hiss. And there she was. The woman stood beneath a flowering Luminara tree, pale blue blossoms drifting down around her like slow snow. She was still barefoot. Her fingers brushed the leaves with reverence, as though the plants could feel her touch. "You're trespassing," Elara said, keeping her voice steady. The woman turned. Up close, she was even more unreal. Her silver eyes held depth, layered reflections like light bending through water. Faint, almost invisible lines traced her skin, not scars but something finer, geometric, as if her body carried the memory of equations written in flesh. I always end up here, the woman replied. Places where things grow. Elara frowned. You vanished from the docking bay. I didn't vanish, she said gently. You just stopped seeing me. That sent a shiver down Elara's spine. Who are you? Elara asked. The woman hesitated for the first time. My name is Lyra, she said at last. At least, that's the name I'm using now. Elara crossed her arms. Using. Lyra smiled, and the expression felt achingly intimate, like a shared secret. You're not afraid of me, Lyra observed. I've faced worse than an unregistered civilian, Elara replied, though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. Lyra stepped closer. The air between them seemed to tighten, humming faintly, like the station's power grid responding to something unseen. You've already crossed the point of no return, Lyra said. The moment you looked at me, the path changed. Elara's jaw tightened. You don't get to decide that. No, Lyra agreed softly. But you do. Before Elara could respond, her calm chirped sharply. Commander, Admiral Cade's voice cut in. We've detected a localized temporal distortion. Origin point, your current location. Elara's eyes snapped to Lyra. What did you do? Elara demanded. Lyra's gaze flicked upward, toward the greenhouse ceiling, toward the stars beyond. I didn't mean for it to happen so soon, she murmured. The ground shuddered. Light rippled through the air, bending and folding like heat above a desert. The Luminara blossoms froze mid-fall, suspended in perfect stillness. Elara staggered back. Lyra. But Lyra didn't move. She looked, relieved. Time stopped. Elara could feel it, not as silence, but as pressure, like being held between heartbeats. Her breath came shallow. Panic clawed at her chest. Everyone else on the station was frozen. Except them. You can move, Lyra said calmly. I was hoping you would be able to. Elara stared. You did this. Yes. Lyra met her gaze. And no. Elara forced herself to step forward. The frozen blossoms brushed against her shoulder, cold and unreal. What are you? Elara whispered. Lyra reached out, hesitating just inches from Elara's face, as if asking permission without words. I'm from a future that no longer exists, Lyra said. One where the star outside this station collapses, and takes everything with it. Elara's breath hitched. You're lying. I wish I were. Lyra's voice trembled, just slightly. I came back to stop it. But I miscalculated. Elara swallowed. Miscalculated what? Lyra's eyes softened, filled with something dangerously close to longing. You, she said. I didn't expect to feel this much. The air between them pulsed, time straining against its suspension. If I don't anchor myself, Lyra continued, the station will tear itself apart trying to correct the paradox. Elara's instinct screamed at her to run, to call for help, to regain control. Instead, she stayed. How do I anchor you? Elara asked. Lyra's hand finally touched Elara's cheek. The contact was electric, warm, real, undeniable. By choosing me, Lyra whispered. Even if it changes everything. Time shuddered. The blossoms began to fall. And Elara realized, with a clarity sharper than fear, that whatever choice she made in this moment would echo across centuries. Time crashed back into motion like a wave breaking against glass. The blossoms hit the ground all at once. Alarms screamed through the greenhouse, red lights flashing as emergency systems struggled to interpret what had just happened. Elara barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to the warmth still lingering on her cheek, to the way Lyra's fingers trembled as they withdrew. Lyra swayed. Elara, she whispered, as if the name itself was an anchor. Elara caught her before she fell. The moment their bodies touched fully, arms around waist, breath against collarbone, the air cracked. Not audibly. Internally. Elara gasped as something surged through her nervous system, a rush of sensation that was not pain but knowing. Images slammed into her mind without warning. A star collapsing inward, blue light screaming as gravity devoured itself. A woman, Lyra, older, bloodied, standing before a council chamber in flames. Elara herself, hair threaded with silver, reaching across a console, whispering, "I will find you again." Elara staggered, gripping Lyra tighter. Lyra cried out, fingers digging into Elara's uniform. "I'm sorry, this is why I didn't want to touch you yet." "Too late," Elara said through clenched teeth. "What was that?" "A resonance echo," Lyra said breathlessly. "Our timelines brushing too close together." Security burst into the greenhouse. Weapons raised. Shouting. Orders overlapping. Elara turned, instinct taking over. "Stand down. Medical emergency." They hesitated. Commander Voss's authority still carried weight. Lyra sagged further, her skin glowing faintly now, the geometric lines along her body pulsing like living circuitry. "She's unstable," one medic said, scanning. "Commander, her cellular structure is fluctuating." Lyra laughed weakly. "That's one way to put it." Elara ignored the stares, the questions. "Get her to my quarters. Now." Elara's quarters were sparse, military minimalism softened only by a single star map etched into the far wall. Lyra lay on the bed, breathing shallowly, eyes half-lidded. "You shouldn't have chosen me," Lyra said quietly. Elara sat beside her, fists clenched. "You told me I had to." "I didn't think you would," Lyra admitted. "Not so quickly." Elara met her gaze. "You froze time in a greenhouse and told me the future ends in fire. What exactly did you expect?" Lyra smiled faintly. "Fear. Distance. Self-preservation." Elara scoffed. "I spent 3 years alone beyond mapped space. Fear doesn't make me run. It makes me focus." Lyra studied her with something like awe. "You're not supposed to exist like this," Lyra murmured. "In my history, you were different. Harder. Closed." Elara's throat tightened. "And now?" "Now you're the variable." The door chimed. Admiral Cade entered without waiting for permission, eyes sharp. "So this is the temporal anomaly," Cade said coolly. Lyra pushed herself upright, wincing. "I have a name." Cade raised a brow. "Do you have a species?" Lyra's jaw tightened. "Human. Mostly." Elara stood. "She's under my protection." Silence. Cade studied Elara carefully. "You're compromised." Elara didn't deny it. "I'm informed." Cade turned back to Lyra. "You claim the star will collapse." "Yes," Lyra said. "And when it does, Astra Prime becomes a coffin." "And you came back alone?" Lyra's gaze flicked to Elara, something unspoken passing between them. "No one else survived the jump." The room went still. Cade exhaled slowly. "We will verify your claims." Lyra nodded. "You won't have time." Cade turned to Elara. "You're off active command." The words landed like a blade. Effective immediately, Cade continued. "Until we determine whether this woman is a threat, or a weapon." Lyra's hand found Elara's. The contact sent a softer echo this time, a quiet hum instead of a storm. Elara looked down at their joined fingers. And understood the true cost of touch. She wasn't just connected to Lyra. She was entangled. That night, as the station slept, Elara dreamed again. But this time, Lyra was there with her, standing beneath a collapsing sky, whispering. We save the future, or we become it. The next morning, Astra Prime felt different. Not because the station had changed, the corridors were still metallic, cold, and humming with machinery, but because Elara had changed. The resonance from Lyra lingered in her nerves, a quiet, persistent vibration like a heartbeat just beneath her skin. Every decision, every thought, felt doubled, shared with someone she barely understood yet already couldn't live without. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't bothered checking her reflection in the polished steel walls. All that mattered was Lyra, lying in the quarters beside her, sleeping fitfully, her silver eyes darting beneath closed lids as if even dreams couldn't escape the pull of the paradox she carried. Admiral Cade's calm shattered the tense silence. "Commander Voss," Cade's voice crackled. "We need you on deck, immediately. The entanglement protocol has been initiated." Elara's stomach nodded. "Protocol? There's a containment breach," Cade said tersely. "Not on this station. In orbit around the secondary star. We've detected fluctuations. Time is unstable in that sector. You need to stabilize it." Elara felt the familiar rush of command. It returned with a bite, prickling in her chest, tinged with dread. "Why me? I'm off duty." "You're the only one who can interact with her safely," Cade said. "And if the station destabilizes, it's not just your future we're talking about." Elara swallowed, nodding once. She turned to Lyra, who now sat up, unsteady but defiant. "I have to go," Elara said. Lyra's silver eyes narrowed. "You're not going alone." "I don't need you risking yourself again," Elara said, her voice sharper than intended. Lyra rose, stretching, the lines of light along her arms pulsing faintly. "You think I've survived 3,000 light-years of a collapsing timeline and multiple deaths to stay behind?" Elara exhaled. There was no argument that would hold. Lyra was coming. The shuttle ride to the secondary star was tense. The stars streaked past in hypnotic lines, and time itself seemed to thrum beneath their skin. Lyra hovered near the controls, fingertips brushing the panels but leaving no marks, her presence resonating with the ship's sensors. Elara watched her closely. "You're different out here." Lyra tilted her head. "I can feel the threads," she said quietly. "The timeline's pulling, nodding. Your presence stabilizes me. Your touch anchors me." Elara's chest tightened. "I don't even understand half of what's happening." "You never will," Lyra admitted. "Not fully. But you will understand enough to make choices. Choices that matter." They arrived in orbit around the secondary star. It was a collapsed sun, fractured and unstable, tendrils of energy arcing outward like liquid lightning. The entanglement protocol was in effect. Automated stabilizers attempted to repair the temporal rifts, but the system had already begun rejecting the corrections. "Time here is fractured," Lyra whispered. "Moments overlapping. If we make the wrong move." Elara didn't need her to finish. The consequences were obvious, but she clenched her jaw anyway. "Then we make the right one." Lyra reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined, and the hum that ran through them surged into a roar, synchronizing with the unstable field around the star. "Elara," Lyra said softly, almost painfully. "This is going to hurt." Elara's lips pressed together. "We survived together." And then Lyra placed her other hand on the console, silver eyes blazing. Energy crackled from her fingers, light bending unnaturally, illuminating the cockpit with impossible shadows. Elara braced herself, matching her energy, anchoring Lyra with her will, her presence, and something deeper, something unspoken, intimate, vital. The star convulsed. The shuttle rocked violently. Reality twisted around them. For a heartbeat, they were suspended, not in space, not in time, but in the raw, bleeding edges of both. And then the star stabilized. Light smoothed into its natural rhythm. Time snapped back. The entanglement protocol succeeded. Lyra slumped against Elara, exhausted, human and fragile again. You saved it, Elara whispered, holding her. No, Lyra murmured. We did. And for the first time since they met, the line between fear and longing blurred completely. They were tethered now, not just to each other, but to fate itself. And Elara knew, with a certainty that frightened her more than any collapsed star, that their story was just beginning. The aftermath of the entanglement protocol left Astra Prime buzzing like a hive shaken by a storm. Alarms had ceased, but whispers hadn't. Security cameras, automated logs, and AI monitors had recorded anomalies beyond comprehension. Lieutenant officers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to fear Lyra, revere her, or deny what they had seen. Elara walked through the corridors with quiet determination, Lyra's hand in hers, fingers intertwined as if letting go would unravel both the present and the future. People are staring, Lyra murmured. Her voice was low, almost playful, but it carried the weight of someone who had survived impossible odds. They're afraid of me. Elara tightened her grip. They should be afraid of losing us if they try to interfere. Lyra chuckled softly, leaning her head against Elara's shoulder. You are far too practical for someone in command. Elara ignored the compliment, focusing instead on the task ahead. Temporal anomalies didn't stop because someone looked cute while staring at her. We need to stabilize the secondary star permanently. One fluctuation could undo everything. Lyra's silver eyes darkened, shadows of worry flickering across her face. There's more than just the star. There's a cascade. Ripples in timelines we haven't even touched yet. Elara swallowed. Meaning? You and I are entangled, Lyra said, her voice trembling slightly. Every moment we spend together now affects billions of possible futures. Every touch, every word, she trailed off, the intensity of her gaze pinning Elara in place. Every choice binds me closer to you, and closer to destruction if we fail. Elara's chest tightened. Then we succeed. No matter the cost. Lyra leaned forward, brushing her lips against Elara's in a fleeting, tentative kiss. It was both an anchor and a warning. This, us, it's already a paradox. Elara's hand rose to cradle Lyra's face. Then let's be the paradox the universe can't ignore. Later, in Elara's quarters, the station felt impossibly quiet. The hum of machinery faded into the background, leaving only the faint resonance of Lyra's presence. Elara watched her, studying the faint geometric lines glowing under Lyra's skin. She had begun to understand that Lyra wasn't entirely human, or at least, not in the way they had defined humanity. She was a living paradox, a bridge between what was and what could be. I've seen timelines where I never meet you, Lyra said quietly, almost to herself. And yet, every one of them ends in failure. Elara knelt beside her, brushing a hand along her arm. Then we ignore those timelines. We make our own. Lyra's eyes glimmered with something fragile and dangerous. And if we can't? Elara hesitated, the weight of their entwined fates pressing down like the gravity of a collapsed star. Then she kissed her, firmly, with certainty. Then we fail together. But we don't fail apart. Days passed. Lyra trained with Elara, learning the ship's systems, the station's defenses, and the fragile technology that stabilized temporal rifts. Slowly, their partnership became seamless, synchronized movements, shared instincts, whispers in the dark that communicated more than words could hold. And all the while, their connection deepened. Touches lasted longer. Glances lingered. Nights spent in shared quarters blurred the lines between duty and desire. The station became their world, and the universe outside a distant threat they could face together. Yet, for all the closeness, a shadow lingered. Lyra's origins remained a mystery. Every time Elara pressed for answers, Lyra deflected, sometimes gently, sometimes with a steel-hard firmness that left Elara restless. I will tell you everything, Lyra promised one night, fingers threaded through hers, voices barely above a whisper. But not yet. Not until I'm certain it won't break you. Elara's heart thudded in her chest, a mixture of longing and frustration. You're already breaking me, she said softly. Every day you exist. Every heartbeat you share with me. Lyra smiled faintly, leaning into her embrace. Good. Then maybe it's working. And as they held each other beneath the artificial stars of Astra Prime, both women understood an unspoken truth. The greatest danger wasn't the collapsing star, the temporal anomalies, or even the station's political tensions. It was the one force neither of them could predict, control, or deny: their own hearts. Astra Prime had never felt so fragile. The station thrummed with quiet unease. Security patrols were tighter, whispers sharper, and the AI sensors hummed nervously in the background, registering every anomaly Lyra left behind like fingerprints across the cosmos. Commander Elara Voss had faced countless threats: pirates, cosmic storms, deep space isolation. But nothing felt as destabilizing as the tension between duty and desire that now crackled through every corridor. Lyra was at her side, as always, but this time not merely as companion or anchor. There was a subtle rigidity to her movements, a constant awareness of the effect their presence together had on the station itself. Every touch, every look, caused minor temporal distortions, ripples that Elara could feel deep in her bones. Temporal fractures are increasing, Lyra said quietly as they entered the control hub. Screens flickered with anomalies, localized time loops, duplicate energy readings, moments repeating and reversing. The star's stabilizer isn't enough. The rift is growing outward. Elara frowned, scanning the readouts. We need more power. Power won't solve this, Lyra said, her silver eyes flashing. It's not just energy. It's structure. Time itself is bending, and it's reacting to us. Elara exhaled. Meaning? Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. Meaning, every choice we make, every action we take together, is part of the fracture. We are the catalyst. Elara froze. We are causing this? Lyra nodded. Not intentionally. But inevitably. Every touch, every shared thought, every decision binds our timelines together. And now, the universe is responding. The alarm system cut in, red lights flashing across the hub. The station's AI voice intoned urgently: temporal instability detected. Sector 4 collapsing. Elara's stomach clenched. Sector 4, that's the residential ring. They rushed toward the affected area, Lyra's hand gripping hers. The corridors twisted oddly, shadows flickering where none should be, and the smell of ozone lingered like the aftertaste of an electrical storm. When they arrived, Elara's breath caught. Time was fractured here more than anywhere else on the station. People moved in loops, some walking backward, others frozen mid-step. Objects hovered and shimmered like holograms, and alarms repeated themselves in endless cycles. Lyra knelt in the middle of the chaos, her hands raised, silver lines along her skin glowing brightly. I can stabilize it temporarily, she said. But we need more than my power. We need alignment. Elara knelt beside her. Alignment? Lyra's gaze softened. You. I need you. Not just here, not just present, but with me, intentionally, willingly. You and I together, as a single resonance. Elara's pulse thudded. You mean, physically? Lyra shook her head. Mentally. Emotionally. Every choice, every heartbeat. We have to bind ourselves consciously. Otherwise, the fractures will spread, and the station, everything, will unravel. Elara swallowed hard, her mind racing. The thought of connecting in that way was terrifying, but the alternative was worse. Then let's do it, she said firmly. They closed their eyes. Fingers intertwined. Breaths synchronized. Thoughts aligned. And then, Lyra placed a hand on Elara's chest, over her heart. A surge ran through Elara, and she felt their timelines entwine like threads of light, coiling and twisting, pulsing together in harmony. The air shimmered. Fractures stuttered and healed. Time waves flattened. People began moving normally again. The station hummed back into a calm rhythm, but the effort left them both trembling. Lyra collapsed against Elara, exhausted. It's temporary. But it worked. Elara held her tight, whispering, "We'll figure it out. Together." But deep in her mind, a warning echoed, soft, insistent, unrelenting. The universe notices. And it will not forget. The paradox of their hearts had stabilized the station, for now. But every action, every choice, every heartbeat they shared had left an imprint. And somewhere in the folds of time, the consequences were waiting. The corridors of Astra Prime no longer felt safe. Even the familiar hum of the station's engines now carried an edge, a whisper of foreboding that made Elara's skin prickle. News of the temporal fractures, and of the woman stabilizing them, had spread faster than any security alert. Whispers of Lyra's existence reached the ears of the council, the governing body of the station, and they did not whisper with kindness. Elara's quarters were no longer private. Every door, every panel, seemed to hum with observation. Cade's face flickered briefly on her calm terminal. "Commander," he said, voice tight, "the council wants an audience. Immediate. Your passenger will accompany you." Lyra tilted her head, silver eyes reflecting a subtle wariness. "Council chambers? That's not just a meeting. That's a trial by politics." Elara exhaled, her fingers brushing against Lyra's. "Then we go. Together." The council chamber loomed above the docking bay, a vast circular room with translucent walls that allowed the dying blue star to cast pale light over the assembly. 12 figures sat in semicircle, robed and stern, each face etched with age, authority, and suspicion. "Commander Voss," intoned the council speaker, a thin, sharp-faced woman named Maris Thorne. "And, the anomaly. You have breached protocol. Unauthorized presence. Temporal manipulation. Explain yourselves." Lyra stepped forward, unflinching. "I am Lyra. I came from the future to prevent the collapse of this station and its star. All actions I have taken were intended to preserve life." The room erupted into murmurs. One member, a tall man with silver hair, leaned forward. "You claim to be from the future? And yet you expect us to trust you?" Elara's hand found Lyra's under the table. "She saved us. She saved me. You saw the fractures yourself. I know it's difficult to understand, but the alternative was destruction." Speaker Thorne's eyes narrowed. "Commander Voss, you've endangered yourself and the station by aligning with this entity. Explain why your judgment should be trusted over protocol." Elara met her gaze steadily. "Because time itself is fractured. These anomalies are beyond policy, beyond procedure. If you force us to act within the Council's narrow rules, Astra Prime will collapse." The Council whispered among themselves, tension thick in the air. Lyra stepped closer to Elara, gently pressing her palm to the commander's chest. Energy rippled faintly between them. "She's right," Lyra said, voice steady, commanding. "Your authority does not matter to the laws of physics. But our connection? It does. Together, we can stabilize the station, but not without trust." A younger council member, eyes wide, spoke. "And what of the people? What of the lives risked by touching time itself?" Elara's gaze swept the chamber. "Every life is at risk if we fail. Every moment. Every heartbeat. You want order, rules, and safety, but time doesn't obey your rules. I do not make this decision lightly, but I choose to act. And I choose her." The chamber went silent. The weight of her words hung between them like suspended gravity. Lyra's eyes met hers, soft, unyielding, a tether to the future they were creating together. Speaker Thorne finally spoke, voice sharp, deliberate. "Then you will be watched. Every step. Every action. Failure will not be tolerated. But, for now, we allow it." Elara exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. Lyra smiled faintly, squeezing her hand. "They'll come to regret underestimating us." Elara smiled back, though the gravity of their position pressed down. "Let them watch. We have bigger battles than politics now." Outside the chamber, as the dying blue star cast fractured light across the docking bays, the two women walked together, side by side. One was a soldier trained to command fleets. The other was a paradox incarnate, silver-eyed and impossible. And together, they carried a future no one else could see. The first warning did not come from the Council. It came from the stars. Astra Prime's long-range sensors screamed to life in the dead of artificial night, tearing Elara from a shallow sleep. The station lights dimmed automatically, shifting to emergency hues as data cascaded across her comm. Unidentified mass emerging from null space. Elara was on her feet before the alarm finished its first cycle. Lyra was already awake. She sat upright on the edge of the bed, silver eyes unfocused, her skin glowing faintly along the familiar geometric lines. But this time the light was uneven, flickering like a dying signal. "They found us," Lyra whispered. Elara crossed the room in 3 strides. "Who found us?" Lyra looked up, and for the first time since they'd met, fear was unmistakable in her expression. The echoes. The observation deck was crowded with officers, council liaisons, and analysts who spoke in hurried, clipped voices. The main viewport showed space folding inward on itself, darkness layered upon darkness, like sound without air. Something was coming through. "It's not a ship," an analyst said, fingers flying over controls. "No propulsion. No recognizable mass. It's repeating." The void rippled. And then a shape emerged. Not solid. Not entirely visible. A silhouette made of overlapping moments, dozens of versions of the same form existing at once. Each one slightly out of sync. Elara felt Lyra tense beside her. "That's impossible," Cade muttered. "Time-layered entities?" "They're what happens," Lyra said softly, "when a future is erased but refuses to die." The echo moved again. Space screamed. A wave of temporal distortion slammed into Astra Prime. Consoles sparked. Officers staggered as gravity hiccuped, briefly reversing before snapping back. Elara grabbed the railing. "Shields up. All power to stabilization fields." "They won't help," Lyra said. Her voice shook. "The echoes don't attack structures. They hunt causes." Elara turned to her sharply. "Meaning us?" Lyra nodded once. "In my timeline, when I changed the past, the echoes followed. They're remnants, people, civilizations, that were overwritten. They exist only to correct paradoxes. By destroying them," Elara said. "Yes." The void entity shifted again, and suddenly the viewport filled with something horrifyingly familiar. It was Lyra. Or rather, versions of her. Dozens of silver-eyed faces layered over one another, mouths opening in silent screams, hands reaching through fractured time. A collective voice filled the deck, vibrating through bone and metal alike. "Return what was taken." Several officers collapsed, clutching their heads. Elara stepped in front of Lyra without thinking. "You want her," she said aloud, voice steady despite the terror clawing her chest. "You go through me." Lyra grabbed her arm. "Elara, no." The echo shifted. And then something unexpected happened. The entity hesitated. Time rippled, not violently, but uncertainly. Lyra inhaled sharply. "It sees you." Elara frowned. "Why would it?" Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "Because you weren't supposed to love me." Silence fell across the deck. "In the original timeline," Lyra continued, "you never chose me. You followed protocol. I failed." The star collapsed. Everything ended. Elara's grip tightened. "But not now." "No," Lyra said. "Now you're a variable the echoes don't understand." The void entity recoiled slightly, its layered forms flickering. The collective voice returned, distorted, uncertain. Anomaly within anomaly. Alarms blared again. Another wave surged toward the station. Lyra turned to Elara, eyes shining with resolve and fear. I have to confront it directly. If I don't, it will keep coming. Elara shook her head violently. Absolutely not. Last time you did something alone, you nearly tore the station apart. Lyra smiled sadly. That was before I had you. She reached up, cupping Elara's face, pressing their foreheads together. If I disappear, Lyra whispered, remember me. Elara's eyes burned. Don't you dare make this a goodbye. Lyra kissed her, deep, urgent, real. I'm not saying goodbye, Lyra said. I'm saying hold on to me. She stepped toward the viewport. The echo surged forward to meet her. And Elara felt their bond stretch, thin as light, strong as gravity, into the void itself. Time screamed. The star flickered. And somewhere beyond space, the universe held its breath. Elara did not ask for permission. She ran. Alarms howled across Astra Prime as she tore through the corridors, boots striking metal in furious rhythm. Behind her, the council shouted orders she ignored. Ahead of her, the stars bent and shuddered, space itself protesting Lyra's absence. Because Lyra was no longer fully here. On the observation deck, the void had opened wider. The echo pressed against reality like a bruise, its layered forms writhing, voices overlapping in a chorus of grief and rage. Lyra stood at the threshold. Half her body was still solid, still human. The other half blurred, phasing in and out of existence, her silver lines burning bright enough to hurt the eyes. Elara. Cade shouted. If she crosses fully, we lose her. And the station. Elara didn't slow. She told me to hold on to her, Elara said, voice fierce, unwavering. I intend to. She reached Lyra just as another temporal wave surged. The deck tilted. Gravity twisted sideways. Elara caught Lyra's hand. And felt the universe pull back. Not gently. Pain tore through Elara's skull as memories not her own slammed into her mind. Cities that never existed. Children who were never born. Worlds erased mid-laugh. She screamed, but she didn't let go. Lyra cried out, collapsing against her. Elara, you can't, this is what broke you in my timeline. Elara gritted her teeth, wrapping her arms around Lyra, anchoring her with sheer force of will. Then your timeline was wrong, Elara snarled. Because I choose you. Again. And again. The echo reacted violently. Its layered form split, fragments peeling away like shattered reflections. The collective voice fractured, no longer unified. Resistance detected. Variable entrenched. Lyra stared at Elara in disbelief. You're fighting it. Elara met her gaze, eyes blazing. No. I'm rewriting it. She closed her eyes. And leaned into the bond. Not resisting the pull, but embracing it. The resonance between them flared, brighter than before. Not chaotic. Not destructive. Intentional. Time bent, not around Lyra alone, but around them. The echo screamed as the overlapping futures destabilized, unable to reconcile a paradox that refused to collapse. Love is not a permitted cause. Elara laughed, a sharp, broken sound. Then your universe was built wrong. The echo began to unravel. Not destroyed, but transformed. Its fragments slowed, their violent oscillations settling into something quieter. Softer. Memories became echoes again, no longer weapons, but remnants. Lyra gasped as her body snapped fully back into phase. She sagged into Elara's arms, solid, real, alive. The void closed. Silence crashed down across the deck. Slowly, systems stabilized. Gravity normalized. The star outside resumed its steady glow. Cade exhaled shakily. By every known law, that shouldn't have worked. Elara pressed her forehead to Lyra's, hands trembling. Get used to it. Lyra laughed weakly, tears streaking down her cheeks. You changed the future. Elara shook her head. We did. Later, in the quiet aftermath, the council chamber was empty save for the two of them. Speaker Thorn's voice echoed from the shadows. The echoes are gone. The fractures are sealed. For now, Lyra said. Thorn studied them both. You are no longer an anomaly. Elara raised a brow. That doesn't sound reassuring. Thorn's lips curved faintly. You are something worse. Lyra squeezed Elara's hand. A precedent. Outside, the blue star shone, no longer dying, but changing. And in the quiet between heartbeats, Elara realized something profound. The future wasn't fixed. It was fighting back. And this time, it was fighting for them. The universe did not forget what they had done. It adjusted. In the days following the Echo's collapse, Astra Prime felt, watched. Not by cameras or council eyes, but by something older, quieter. The stars outside the station seemed sharper, their light lingering just a moment too long, as if space itself were learning their names. Lyra changed. Not dramatically, no sudden bursts of light or violent instability, but subtly, in ways Elara felt more than saw. Lyra slept longer. When she woke, she sometimes stared at nothing, her silver eyes reflecting constellations that didn't exist on any map. What do you see? Elara asked one night, brushing Lyra's hair back gently. Lyra hesitated. Memories, she said. Not mine. Not yours. The universe's. Elara stilled. That's comforting. Somehow. Lyra smiled faintly. It shouldn't be. The council demanded answers. They gathered in a sealed chamber, this time without robes or ceremony. Just 12 tired people facing the impossible. You didn't just repel an echo, Speaker Thorn said. You altered the structure of causality around this system. Lyra nodded. The echoes were the universe attempting to correct a mistake. But Elara introduced a variable it couldn't overwrite. Elara crossed her arms. You mean love? Several council members looked uncomfortable. Thorn exhaled. We mean choice. Lyra shook her head gently. Choice alone wasn't enough. Others chose differently and still failed. She turned to Elara, her gaze softening. She stayed. Silence followed. Finally, Thorn spoke again. Then tell us what you are. Lyra closed her eyes. When she opened them, the silver was gone, replaced by something deeper, darker, threaded with starlight. I am a continuum architect, Lyra said. The room seemed to tilt. In the far future, she continued, when time fractures became uncontainable, a small number of us were created, not born, to listen to reality. To feel where it would break, and mend it before collapse. Elara's breath caught. Created, how? Lyra's voice was quiet. From people who loved too fiercely to let the universe end. Elara reached for her hand. In my origin timeline, Lyra said, you inspired the theory. But you died before it could be realized. Elara swallowed hard. And now? Now, Lyra said, squeezing her fingers, you're alive. And the universe remembers that. One council member leaned forward, shaken. Then what happens to you now? Lyra looked at Elara. And for the first time, uncertainty edged her voice. I don't know. That night, the station dimmed its lights to starlight mode. Elara and Lyra stood alone at the viewport, the blue star glowing steady and strong. If you're meant to become something else, Elara began. Lyra turned to her immediately. I don't want to. Elara laughed softly. That wasn't what I was going to say. Lyra tilted her head. Elara took her hands. If the universe tries to take you away from me, then it's going to have a fight on its hands. Lyra smiled, tears bright in her eyes. You already fought it once. I'm very stubborn. Lyra leaned in, resting her forehead against Elara's. "You're my anchor," Lyra whispered. "Not just to this time. To being." Outside, the stars shimmered, subtly rearranging, as if writing something new into the dark. What the stars remembered was not destruction. Not correction. But two women who chose each other. And refused to let go. The shape of tomorrow arrived quietly. Not with alarms or ruptures in space, but with a message routed through channels so old even the station AI hesitated before decrypting it. Elara was in the command ring when the alert came through, no sound, just a flicker of cold blue text across the main display. Origin signal detected. Source, outside causal space. Classification, archival/active. Lyra froze the moment the text appeared. Her breath caught. Her hand tightened around the edge of the console as if the floor itself had tilted. "That's not possible," she whispered. Elara turned. "You recognize it?" Lyra nodded slowly. "It's from the continuum. From after my time." The room seemed to contract. "You said you didn't know what would happen to you now," Elara said carefully. "I didn't," Lyra replied. "But this means they've noticed the deviation." The signal unfolded on the screen, layers of data folding into a holographic projection. A symbol appeared, a spiral intersected by a single, unbroken line. Elara felt a pressure in her skull, not pain, but recognition without understanding. Lyra's voice dropped. "They're calling me back." Silence. Not the quiet of space, but the kind that presses in on the chest. Elara swallowed. "Calling you back where?" "To a place that exists between futures," Lyra said. "Where choices are observed, not lived." Elara stepped closer. "And if you answer?" Lyra didn't look at her. "I stop being this. I become what I was made to be." Elara's hands clenched. "And if you don't?" Lyra finally met her eyes. "The continuum will intervene. They don't erase anomalies anymore. They isolate them." Elara's jaw tightened. "Meaning?" "They cut them out of time. No past. No future. Just silence." The words hit like vacuum. Elara took Lyra's face in her hands. "Then we don't give them the chance." Lyra shook her head, tears gathering. "You don't understand. They're not villains. They're what happens when survival replaces hope." Elara's voice was fierce. "Then they forgot something." Lyra searched her face. "What?" Elara pressed her forehead to Lyra's. "That tomorrow isn't something you manage. It's something you choose." For a moment, Lyra looked like she might break. Then the signal pulsed again, stronger this time. "Architect Lyra, 7. Report for reintegration. Deviation threshold exceeded." Lyra inhaled sharply. "They're giving me one chance. If I go willingly, they'll leave you untouched." Elara laughed softly, incredulously. "That's their mercy?" Lyra's voice cracked. "Elara. I was created from people who loved too fiercely. This is the price." Elara leaned back just enough to look into her eyes. "No," she said. "This is the lie they tell themselves so they can keep going." She turned toward the viewport, toward the stars that had already bent once for them. "You said the universe remembers us," Elara continued. "Then let's give it something worth remembering." Lyra's breath shook. "What are you saying?" Elara faced her again. "We don't run. We don't surrender. We don't ask permission." A slow, dawning smile touched Lyra's lips, equal parts fear and wonder. "You want to challenge the continuum?" Elara nodded. "I want to build a future they can't overwrite." The signal flared, filling the room with cold light. Somewhere beyond causality, something ancient stirred. And for the first time in all her remembered timelines, Lyra felt something new take shape. Not inevitability. But hope. The continuum did not wait. The stars around Astra Prime began to shift, not physically, but conceptually. Constellations rearranged themselves into patterns no astronomer had ever charted. Time signatures fluctuated, stretching seconds into long, aching breaths. The universe was preparing to intervene. Elara stood at the center of the command ring, spine straight, hands braced against the console as if she could physically hold the future in place. Lyra stood beside her, trembling, not with fear, but with restraint. "They're approaching through causal layers," Lyra said softly. "Not ships. Not entities. Decisions." Elara snorted quietly. "Figures." Across the station, systems flickered. Communications spiked, then went silent. Only one channel remained open, a direct line to something vast and impersonal. The air thickened. Then a voice spoke, not aloud, but everywhere at once. "This path is not sustainable." Elara felt the words in her bones. Lyra closed her eyes. "Continuum," she said calmly. "I acknowledge receipt." The pressure increased. "Architect Lyra, 7 has exceeded permissible variance." "Anomaly, Commander Elara Voss." Elara lifted her chin. "You make it sound like an illness." A pause. "Love introduces unbounded uncertainty." Lyra inhaled shakily. "So does life." The pressure wavered. Elara stepped forward. "You're wrong about one thing," she said, voice steady and resonant. "This path is sustainable. Just not predictable." Silence followed, longer this time. Then. "Predictability ensures survival." Elara shook her head. "Survival isn't the same as living." Lyra reached for Elara's hand. Their bond flared, not violently, but warmly, like a hearth against the cold. "You were created from love," Lyra said, voice strong now. "From people who refuse to let everything end. You exist because someone chose connection over control." The stars outside brightened. "Origin parameters confirmed." Lyra continued, heart pounding. "Then honor them. Honor us." The continuum hesitated. For the first time since its emergence, it hesitated. Elara felt it, the universe holding its breath again. "You want stability?" Elara said. "Then let us be your constant." Lyra squeezed her hand. "We'll stay. We'll help. But not as tools. As partners." Light rippled outward from Astra Prime, not destructive, not corrective, but expansive. Temporal fractures across the system flattened. The blue star pulsed, strong and alive. The voice returned, quieter now. "Proposal. Unprecedented." Elara smiled faintly. "So was love, once." A long pause. Then. "Conditional acceptance." The pressure lifted. Lyra gasped, sagging against Elara, laughing through tears. "Elara, they're not taking me." Elara wrapped her arms around her. "They never were." The voice spoke one last time. "This future will be observed." Elara met the stars without flinching. "Good." Later, as Astra Prime slowly returned to normal, the council convened, not to judge, but to listen. Speaker Thorne's voice was quiet. "You've changed the rules." Elara nodded. "We changed the outcome." Lyra stood beside her, no longer flickering, no longer fading. Together. That night, beneath artificial starlight, Elara and Lyra lay side by side, hands intertwined. For the first time, Lyra whispered, "I don't know what comes next." Elara smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That's not uncertainty." Lyra turned to her, silver eyes warm. "It's freedom." Outside, the stars did not rearrange. They watched. And the future, vast, unwritten, and finally their own, began to choose them back. The future did not arrive all at once. It unfolded. Years passed, measured not only in orbits and reports, but in quiet mornings, shared silences, and the slow, deliberate work of building something that had never existed before. Astra Prime became more than a station. It became a threshold. Elara Voss no longer wore the title commander in the way she once had. Authority still followed her, naturally, inevitably, but now it was tempered by something gentler. She led not by command alone, but by trust. By listening. Lyra remained. Not as an architect pulled between worlds, but as a bridge, walking openly between science and intuition, between time as it was and time as it could be. Her silver eyes softened with the years, though starlight never fully left them. Together, they founded the Resonance Accord, a pact between systems that recognized temporal instability not as a threat to be erased, but as a responsibility to be shared. Astra Prime became the first place where time-displaced refugees were welcomed instead of hunted. The Continuum watched. But it did not interfere. It learned. On the anniversary of the star's stabilization, Elara and Lyra stood once more at the observation deck. The blue star burned steady and bright now, no longer dying, no longer afraid. "Do you ever miss who you were supposed to be?" Elara asked quietly. Lyra considered the question. "I remember her," she said. "But I don't miss her. She never got to choose." Elara smiled. They had lines in their faces now, earned, not mourned. Love had settled into them the way gravity settles into planets, constant, shaping, impossible to escape. Below them, children ran through the greenhouse ring, some born on Astra Prime, others brought from fractured timelines that no longer had a home. One girl paused, staring up at the star with open wonder. "She's like you were," Elara murmured. Lyra's eyes softened. "No. She's like who we made space for." The council chamber stood empty now. It had become a museum of sorts, records etched into crystal walls, telling the story of the moment the universe had been challenged and chosen not to correct itself. At the center of the room was a single inscription. "The future is not preserved by control, but by courage." No names. No monuments. Just truth. When Elara's hair finally turned silver, real silver, not starlight, Lyra kissed her with the same reverence she had the first day they met. "Do you think the universe remembers us?" Elara asked one evening, voice soft with age. Lyra rested her head against Elara's shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of her heart. "Yes," she said. "Not as anomalies. Not as variables." Elara closed her eyes. "Then what?" Lyra smiled. "As proof." Long after they were gone, long after Astra Prime became legend, the Resonance Accord endured. Time fractures still occurred. Stars still died. But never again without someone willing to stand in the space between what was and what could be, hands open, heart unafraid. And when scholars traced the moment everything changed, they did not find a battle or a catastrophe. They found a choice. Two women. One future. Refusing to let go. And the universe. At last. Letting them stay.